The blood on her dress told Samuel Nash everything he needed to know about the kind of trouble that had found its way into his barn, and nothing at all about whether he should help her or reach for his rifle. The late afternoon sun of June 1878 cast long shadows across the hay-strewn floor as Samuel stood in the doorway of his barn just outside Bentonville, Arkansas, studying the woman who had wedged herself between two hay bales in the far corner. She was trembling, her dark hair matted with sweat and dirt, her green eyes wide with a terror that made his chest tighten despite his better judgment. The blood on her torn calico dress appeared mostly dried, which meant whatever had happened to her had occurred hours ago, maybe longer. "I am not going to hurt you," Samuel said, keeping his voice low and steady the way he might with a spooked horse. He was 32 years old and had run this ranch alone for the past 3 years since his father died, and in all that time, he had never once found another soul hiding in his barn. "But I need to know if that blood is yours or someone else's." The woman's lips parted, but no sound came out at first. She was young, maybe 24 or 25, with delicate features that were now pinched with exhaustion and fear. When she finally spoke, her voice was hoarse and barely above a whisper. "Please," she managed. "Please do not turn me away. I have nowhere else to go." Samuel took a cautious step forward, his boots crunching on the scattered hay. His ranch hand, Tommy, had gone into town for supplies and would not be back until tomorrow, which meant Samuel was alone to deal with this situation. He should have felt more wary than he did, but something about the desperation in her eyes pulled at something deep in his chest. "I asked you a question," he said, gentler this time. "Is that your blood?" She looked down at herself as if seeing the stains for the first time, then shook her head. "No, it is not mine. I am not hurt, not badly anyway." She held up her hands, and Samuel could see the rope burns on her wrists, raw and angry against her pale skin. "Who did that to you?" The words came out harder than he intended, and he saw her flinch. "My husband," she whispered, and then, as if the admission had broken something loose inside her, she continued in a rush. "Or the man who claimed to be my husband. His name is Victor Jameson, and he killed a man tonight, shot him dead in our parlor because the man owed him money. Then Victor tied me to a chair because I screamed, because I told him I was going to tell the sheriff what he had done. He said he would kill me too if I did not keep quiet, that he would make it look like an accident." Samuel felt his jaw tighten. He had heard of Victor Jameson, a gambler and businessman who had moved to Bentonville about 2 years ago with what he claimed was his wife. Samuel had never met the man personally, had only heard the talk in town about how Jameson always seemed to have money for cards but never paid his debts on time. "How did you get away?" Samuel asked. The woman, whose name he still did not know, drew in a shaky breath. "He drank whiskey after it happened. A lot of it. When he passed out in his chair, I managed to work one hand free. It took me over an hour, but I got loose. I knew I could not go to the sheriff because Victor has friends, men who would lie for him. I knew he would wake up and come looking for me. So I ran. I ran until I saw your barn, and I thought maybe I could hide here, just for a little while, just until I could figure out what to do next." Samuel ran a hand through his dark hair, his mind racing. This was trouble, the kind that could get a man killed if he made the wrong choice. But looking at this woman, at the rope burns on her wrists and the haunted look in her eyes, he found that his conscience would not let him turn her away. "What is your name?" he asked. "Zara," she said. "Zara Jameson, though I wish to God I could take that name off like a dirty dress and burn it." "All right, Zara. My name is Samuel Nash, and this is my ranch. You can stay here tonight, but come morning, we need to figure out what we are going to do about this situation. If Victor Jameson really did kill someone, the sheriff needs to know. regardless of who his friends are. Zara scrambled to her feet, swaying slightly. Samuel moved forward on instinct, catching her elbow to steady her. She was shorter than he had thought, the top of her head barely reaching his shoulder. Up close, he could see that she was even younger than his initial estimate, probably no more than 23. "You do not understand," she said urgently. "Victor is not just some gambler, he is connected. He knows people. Bad people. If I go to the sheriff, if I accuse him of murder, I will end up dead. He will make sure of it." "Then what do you want to do?" Samuel asked. "Hide in my barn forever." The question came out more harshly than he meant it to, and he saw tears spring to her eyes. She pulled away from his grip and wrapped her arms around herself. "I do not know," she admitted. "I just know I cannot go back there. I would rather die out here in the wilderness than go back to that house." Samuel studied her for a long moment, weighing his options. The smart thing would be to take her into town right now. Let the law sort it out. But he had lived in Bentonville long enough to know that justice was not always as blind as it should be, especially when money and connections were involved. And something about Zara's story rang true in a way that made his protective instincts flare to life. "Come on," he finally said, gesturing toward the barn door. "Let us get you cleaned up and fed. You look like you have not eaten in days." Zara hesitated, her eyes searching his face as if looking for some sign of deception. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she nodded and followed him out of the barn and across the dusty yard toward his house. The ranch house was modest but well kept, a 2-story structure with a wide front porch that his mother had loved to sit on during the summer evenings before she passed. Samuel led Zara inside and gestured toward the kitchen. "Sit," he said, pulling out a chair at the wooden table. "I will heat some water so you can wash up, and then I will make us something to eat." Zara sank into the chair gratefully, and Samuel could see how exhausted she truly was. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hands trembled where they rested on the table. He busied himself with starting a fire in the stove and filling a pot with water from the pump, trying not to think too hard about the fact that he had just invited a strange woman into his home, a woman whose husband was apparently a murderer. While the water heated, Samuel pulled out what food he had available. There was some leftover beef from last night's dinner, fresh bread that Tommy's wife had sent over yesterday, and some early summer vegetables from the garden. It was not fancy, but it was substantial. "When did you eat last?" he asked, slicing the bread. "Yesterday morning," Zara replied softly. "Victor and I had breakfast together before everything happened, before the man came to the house asking for his money back." Samuel turned to look at her. "This man Victor killed, who was he?" His name was Robert Porter. He owned a small farm on the outskirts of town. Victor had sold him what he said was prime cattle stock, but the animals were sick. Half of them died within a month. Porter wanted his money back, and Victor refused. They had been arguing about it for weeks. "So Porter came to your house to confront him?" Zara nodded. "He came in the evening right after dinner. He was angry, shouting. Victor told me to go upstairs, but I could hear everything. They argued for maybe 10 minutes, and then I heard the gunshot. Just one. When I came running down, Porter was on the floor and Victor was standing over him with his pistol. There was so much blood." Her voice cracked on the last word, and Samuel saw her swallow hard, fighting back tears. He brought over a plate of food and set it in front of her. "Eat," he said gently. "You need your strength." Zara picked up the bread with shaking hands and took a small bite. Samuel watched her for a moment, then turned back to check the water. When it was warm enough, he poured it into a basin and brought it over to the table along with a clean cloth and a bar of soap. "Here," he said, "clean yourself up while I finish the food." Zara looked up at him with eyes that were suddenly bright with unshed tears. "Why are you helping me? You do not know me. You do not know if I am telling the truth." Samuel met her gaze steadily. "I know rope burns when I see them. And I know the look of someone who has been genuinely terrified for their life. That is enough for me, at least for tonight." She held his gaze for a moment longer, then nodded and began washing her face and hands. Samuel went back to preparing the food, his mind working through the problem. If what Zara said was true, and he had no reason to doubt her, then Victor Jameson was a dangerous man who would stop at nothing to protect himself. The question was, what was Samuel going to do about it? They ate in relative silence, with Zara devouring her food like someone who had not realized how hungry she was. Samuel found himself watching her between bites, noting the way her shoulders gradually began to relax, the way some of the fear started to leave her eyes. She was pretty, he realized, beneath the dirt and the exhaustion. More than pretty, actually. She had a fine-boned elegance that reminded him of the few society women he had encountered during his brief time in Little Rock. "How did you end up married to a man like Victor Jameson?" Samuel asked when they had finished eating. Zara set down her fork and stared at her empty plate. "I was foolish and desperate. My parents died of fever 4 years ago, and I had no other family. I was working as a seamstress in Little Rock, barely making enough to pay for my room and board. Victor came into the shop one day, charming and well-dressed. He courted me for 3 months, told me he was a successful businessman, that he could give me a good life. I believed him. We married and moved here to Bentonville, where he said he had opportunities." "And you did not know about his gambling, his schemes?" "Not at first. He was careful to keep that side of his life hidden from me. But over the past year, I have seen more and more of who he really is. He is cruel when he drinks, and lately he has been drinking more. And the people who come to our door looking for money they are owed, there have been so many of them. I have been afraid for months, but I had nowhere to go, no money of my own. He controlled everything." Samuel felt a surge of anger toward this Victor Jameson, a man he had never met. The idea of any man treating his wife that way, of trapping her and terrorizing her, made his blood boil. "You are safe here," he said firmly. "At least for tonight. Tomorrow we will figure out the next steps." Zara looked at him with an expression that was equal parts gratitude and uncertainty. "What if he comes looking for me? What if he figures out I am here? This ranch is a few miles outside of town, and Victor Jameson has no reason to know who I am or where I live. You said yourself that you ran for a long time before you found my barn. It will take him time to search, and by then, maybe we will have figured out a plan." The words sounded more confident than Samuel felt, but he could see that Zara needed the reassurance. She nodded slowly and stood up from the table. "I should let you rest," Samuel said. "There is a guest room upstairs. It is not much, but the bed is clean and the door has a lock." "Thank you," Zara whispered. "I do not know how I can ever repay you for this kindness." Samuel shook his head. "You do not owe me anything. Come on, I will show you the room." He led her upstairs to the small guest room that had once belonged to his younger sister before she married and moved to Missouri. It had a simple bed with a quilt his mother had made, a washstand, and a small wardrobe. Zara looked around the room as if it were a palace. "This is wonderful," she said softly. "I will be just down the hall if you need anything," Samuel told her. "Try to get some sleep." Zara turned to face him, and for a moment they stood there in the doorway, the space between them charged with something Samuel could not quite name. Then she reached out and touched his hand briefly, her fingers cool against his skin. "Thank you, Samuel, truly." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and then stepped back into the hallway, pulling the door closed behind him. He stood there for a moment, listening to the sound of her moving around the room, and then headed back downstairs to check that all the doors and windows were locked. Sleep did not come easily that night. Samuel lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with questions and possibilities. What was he going to do with Zara? He could not keep her hidden here forever. Eventually, Victor would come looking, or someone in town would notice she was missing. And if Victor really had killed Robert Porter, there would be an investigation. The sheriff would have questions. But more than the practical concerns, Samuel found himself troubled by the way his thoughts kept returning to Zara herself. To the way she had looked at him with those green eyes, full of trust and hope. To the feeling of her fingers briefly touching his hand. He barely knew her, and yet something about her had already worked its way under his skin. He finally drifted off sometime after midnight, only to wake before dawn with a sense of urgency he could not explain. Samuel dressed quickly and headed downstairs, intending to start his morning chores. But as he passed by the stairs, he heard a sound from the guest room, a soft, muffled crying. He hesitated, his hand on the banister, torn between giving her privacy and checking to make sure she was all right. Finally, his concern won out and he climbed the stairs and knocked softly on her door. "Zara, are you all right?" The crying stopped abruptly. After a moment, her voice came through the door, thick with tears. "I am fine. I am sorry if I woke you. You did not wake me. May I come in?" There was a pause, and then he heard her footsteps crossing the room. The door opened, and Zara stood there in the same dress she had worn yesterday, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "I could not sleep," she said. "Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Robert Porter lying there on the floor. I kept thinking about his wife, about how she does not know yet that her husband is dead, about how Victor is probably getting away with it even as we speak." Samuel felt his jaw clench. "He will not get away with it, I promise you that." "How can you promise that? You do not know Victor. You do not know what he is capable of." "No," Samuel agreed. "But I know that running and hiding is not going to solve anything. When the sun comes up, I am going to ride into town and talk to the sheriff. I am going to tell him what you told me, and then we are going to make sure justice is done." Zara shook her head vehemently. "No, you cannot. If you go to the sheriff, Victor will know I told someone. He will come after me, after both of us. Then we make sure the sheriff arrests him before he has the chance," Samuel said firmly. "Zara, you cannot live your life in fear of this man. And if Robert Porter is really dead, his family deserves to know what happened to him." Zara wrapped her arms around herself, her whole body trembling. Samuel reached out without thinking and pulled her into his arms. She stiffened for a moment, then collapsed against him, her tears soaking into his shirt. He held her, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring soft reassurances that he hoped were true. "I am so scared," she whispered against his chest. "I know, but you are not alone anymore. I am going to help you through this, I promise." They stood there for a long moment, and Samuel became acutely aware of the way she fit against him, the way her breathing gradually slowed and steadied. When she finally pulled back, her cheeks were flushed with embarrassment. "I am sorry," she said. "I do not know what came over me." "You have nothing to apologize for," Samuel said gently. "You have been through hell. You are allowed to be scared." Zara looked up at him with those green eyes, and Samuel felt something shift in his chest. It was too soon, he told himself. He had only met her yesterday, but the feeling was there nonetheless, undeniable and growing stronger by the moment. "Let me make us some breakfast," he said, stepping back to put some distance between them. "Then we will figure out what to do next." They went downstairs together, and Samuel busied himself with cooking eggs and frying some bacon. Zara sat at the table, watching him with an expression he could not quite read. The early morning light filtered through the kitchen windows, casting everything in a soft golden glow. "You did not have to do all this for me," Zara said softly. Most men would have turned me away, or worse, turned me into Victor. Samuel turned to look at her. I am not most men, and I could not live with myself if I sent you back to a man who would hurt you. Why not? You do not know me. For all you know, I could be lying about everything. Are you? No, she said immediately, but you have no reason to believe that. Samuel plated the food and brought it over to the table, sitting down across from her. I told you last night, I know the signs of abuse when I see them. And I believe you are telling me the truth. That is enough. They ate in comfortable silence, and Samuel found himself studying Zara when she was not looking. Despite everything she had been through, there was a strength to her that he admired. She had not given up, had not simply accepted her fate. She had fought back, had risked everything to get away from Victor. That took courage. When they finished eating, Samuel stood and started clearing the dishes. I need to do my morning chores, he said. The animals need to be fed and the horses need to be turned out. You can stay here in the house if you want, or you can come with me. I will come with you, Zara said immediately. I do not want to be alone right now. Samuel nodded and led her outside into the cool morning air. The sun was just beginning to rise over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. His ranch was not large by some standards, but it was well maintained. He had about 50 head of cattle, a dozen horses, some chickens, and 2 milk cows. It was enough to make a decent living, especially with Tommy's help. Zara followed him to the barn, watching as he measured out feed for the horses. This is a beautiful place, she said. How long have you lived here? I was born in that house, Samuel replied. My father built it when he and my mother first came to Arkansas. They started this ranch with nothing but determination and a piece of land they bought cheap. I grew up working this land, learning everything I know from them. Where are they now? Dead. My mother died of pneumonia when I was 23. My father lasted 3 more years after that before his heart gave out. I think he died of a broken heart as much as anything else. He missed her terribly. Zara was quiet for a moment. That must have been hard, losing both of them. It was. But I had this place and the work kept me going. Still does. Samuel finished with the horses and moved on to the chickens, gathering eggs while they clucked and pecked around his feet. What about you? Did you have a happy childhood? Mostly, Zara said, a wistful note entering her voice. My parents were not wealthy, but they loved each other and they loved me. My father was a school teacher and my mother took in sewing. We had enough. I was happy. And then the fever came through our town, and within 2 weeks, they were both gone. I was 19 years old, and suddenly, I had nothing and no one. I am sorry, Samuel said, and he meant it. So am I. If they were still alive, I never would have married Victor. I never would have been so desperate that I ignored all the warning signs that told me he was not a good man. They finished the morning chores together, falling into an easy rhythm that surprised them both. Zara helped gather eggs and fill water troughs, and Samuel found himself enjoying her company. She asked thoughtful questions about the ranch and listened attentively to his answers. It had been a long time since he had someone to talk to like this, someone who seemed genuinely interested in his life and his work. When they were done, they headed back to the house, and Samuel made them both coffee. They sat on the front porch, sipping from their mugs and watching the sun climb higher in the sky. I need to go into town today, Samuel said finally. I need to talk to the sheriff about what you told me. Zara's hand tightened on her mug. Please do not. Not yet. Just give me a few more days to figure out what I am going to do. Zara, every day we wait is another day that Victor has to cover his tracks. If we are going to do this, we need to do it now while the evidence is still fresh. What evidence? It is my word against his. And he is the one with money and connections. The sheriff will believe him over me. Samuel set down his coffee and turned to face her. Then we need to find evidence. We need to find proof that Victor killed Robert Porter. Zara looked at him with a mixture of hope and desperation. How? I do not know yet, but there has to be something. A witness, physical evidence at the house, something. We just need to figure out what it is. They sat in silence for a while, both of them thinking. Finally, Zara spoke. There might be something. When Victor killed Porter, he dragged the body into the cellar. He said he was going to bury it later, after dark, somewhere no one would find it. But then he started drinking and passed out. The body might still be there. Samuel felt a chill run down his spine. If the body is still in your cellar, that is all the evidence we need. But we need to get to it before Victor does something with it. How? We cannot just walk into the house. No, but I can watch the house. I can wait until Victor leaves and then we can search the cellar. Zara shook her head. It is too dangerous. What if he comes back while we are there? That is a risk we are going to have to take, unless you have a better idea. She was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the ranch land stretching before them. Finally, she turned to him. There is one other person who might help us. Victor has a business partner, a man named Daniel Wright. Daniel is not like Victor. He is a good man, or at least he tries to be. I think Victor has been using him, manipulating him into schemes that Daniel does not fully understand. If we could talk to Daniel, maybe he would be willing to testify against Victor. Samuel considered this. Where can we find this Daniel Wright? He runs a general store in town, but we would have to be careful. Victor might have already gotten to him, might have convinced him to lie if anyone asks questions. It is worth a try, Samuel said. I will ride into town this afternoon and feel him out, see if he seems like the kind of man who would help us. Zara looked at him with those green eyes, and Samuel saw fear there, but also gratitude and something else he could not quite name. You are taking a huge risk by helping me, she said softly. If Victor finds out, he could come after you too. Samuel reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing over the rope burns on her wrist. I am not afraid of Victor Jameson, and I am not going to let him hurt you again. The words hung in the air between them, charged with an intensity that made Samuel's heart beat faster. Zara's lips parted, and for a moment he thought she might say something more. But then she just squeezed his hand and nodded. Samuel rode into Bentonville that afternoon, leaving Zara safely hidden at the ranch. The town was busier than usual, with people gathered in small groups on the street corners, talking in low voices. As Samuel tied his horse to the hitching post outside Wright's general store, he overheard snippets of conversation that made his blood run cold. Found him this morning out by Miller's Creek. Shot in the chest, they say. Sheriff is looking for his wife. No one has seen her since last night. Samuel felt his jaw clench. So Robert Porter's body had been found, but clearly not in Victor's cellar where Zara said he had been killed. Victor must have moved it during the night, made it look like Porter had been killed somewhere else. And now the sheriff was looking for Zara, which meant Victor had probably already spun some story to make her look guilty. He pushed open the door to the general store, a bell jingling overhead. The shop was neat and well stocked, with shelves full of dry goods, tools, and household supplies. A man stood behind the counter, middle-aged with graying hair and a worried expression. "Can I help you?" the man asked. "Are you Daniel Wright?" "I am. Who is asking?" "My name is Samuel Nash. I run a ranch a few miles outside of town. I was hoping I could talk to you about Victor Jameson." Daniel's face went pale, and he glanced nervously toward the door. "I do not know what you heard, but I do not want any trouble." "I am not here to cause trouble," Samuel said, keeping his voice low. "I am here because I think you might be in a position to help someone who desperately needs it." Daniel studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Wait here." He went to the door, flipped the sign to closed, and pulled down the shade. Then he came back behind the counter. "All right, talk." Samuel took a breath and made a calculated decision. He was going to trust this man, at least partially. "Zara Jameson is hiding at my ranch. She came to me yesterday, terrified with rope burns on her wrists. She told me that Victor killed Robert Porter in their home, then tied her up and threatened to kill her if she told anyone. She managed to escape and has been hiding ever since." Daniel closed his eyes and leaned heavily against the counter. "God help us all. You knew," Samuel said. "You knew what Victor was capable of." "I suspected," Daniel admitted. "Victor and I went into business together about a year ago. At first, it seemed legitimate. But then I started noticing things. Money that did not add up. Customers who claimed they had been cheated. I confronted Victor about it a few months ago, and he threatened me. Said if I told anyone, he would make sure I lost everything. He had evidence, he said, that would make it look like I was the one stealing." "Were you?" "No," Daniel said firmly. "I swear to you, I have never cheated anyone in my life. But Victor is clever. He is good at making things look however he wants them to look. I have been trying to figure out how to get away from him without losing my store, my reputation, everything I have worked for." Samuel leaned forward. "Then help me now. Help me make sure Victor faces justice for what he did to Robert Porter and what he did to Zara." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "You do not understand. Victor has the sheriff in his pocket. Sheriff Morrison owes Victor money from gambling debts. He is not going to believe anything that goes against Victor's story." "What is Victor's story?" "He is saying that Zara killed Robert Porter, that they were having an affair and Porter wanted her to run away with him. Victor claims he came home and found them arguing, that Zara shot Porter and then ran. He has been playing the heartbroken husband all morning, telling everyone who will listen that his wife was unfaithful and is now a murderer." Samuel felt rage building in his chest. "That is a lie, all of it." "I know it is," Daniel said quietly. "I have seen the way Victor treats Zara. I have seen the bruises she tries to hide. And I know Victor is the kind of man who would kill someone over a debt. But knowing something and proving it are two different things." "The body," Samuel said. "Where was it found?" "Out by Miller's Creek, about 2 miles from town. Victor must have moved it there last night to make his story more believable." Samuel thought quickly. "Were there any witnesses to what happened? Anyone who can contradict Victor's story?" Daniel shook his head. "Not that I know of. Victor lives on the edge of town. His nearest neighbors are elderly and mostly deaf. They would not have heard a gunshot." Samuel felt frustration building. There has to be something, some way to prove that Victor is lying. Daniel was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then his eyes widened slightly. "There might be. Victor had me order a gun for him last month, a Colt .45. He said his old one was not reliable anymore. I have the receipt right here in my records. If the gun that killed Porter is the same caliber, and if we can prove that Victor bought a new gun just weeks before the murder, that might be enough to at least cast doubt on his story." "Where is the gun now?" "Victor picked it up 2 weeks ago. He must still have it." Samuel nodded slowly. "This was not much, but it was something. I need you to give me that receipt, and I need you to be willing to testify that Victor has been cheating people, that he is not the upstanding citizen he claims to be." Daniel looked torn. "If I do that, I will lose everything. Victor will make sure of it." "If you do not do it, an innocent woman will hang for a crime she did not commit, and Victor will get away with murder. Can you live with that?" Daniel stared at him for a long moment, then slowly shook his head. "No, no, I cannot." He went to his desk and pulled out a ledger, flipping through the pages until he found what he was looking for. He carefully tore out the receipt and handed it to Samuel. "Here. This shows that Victor bought a new Colt .45 on May 22nd, and I will testify if it comes to that." But you need to understand, this might not be enough. Sheriff Morrison is corrupt and Victor has other friends in town. Powerful friends. Then we go over the sheriff's head, Samuel said. We take this to the federal marshal in Little Rock if we have to, but we are not going to let Victor win. Daniel nodded slowly. There is one more thing you should know. Victor came by the store this morning, asking if I had seen Zara. He seemed desperate, more so than his grieving husband act would suggest. I think he knows that she is the only one who can contradict his story. If he finds her, he will kill her. There is no doubt in my mind about that. Samuel felt his protective instincts flare. He is not going to find her. I will make sure of it. He left the store with the receipt tucked safely in his pocket and rode back to the ranch, his mind working through possible plans. When he arrived, he found Zara standing on the porch, her face pale with worry. "What happened?" she asked immediately. "What did you find out?" Samuel dismounted and tied his horse, then climbed the porch steps to stand beside her. He told her everything Daniel had said, watching as her face grew even paler. "He is telling people I killed Robert," she whispered. "He is making me out to be a murderer and an adulteress." "I know," Samuel said gently, "but we are not going to let him get away with it. Daniel gave me proof that Victor bought a new gun just weeks before the murder. It is not much, but it is a start. And Daniel is willing to testify about Victor's schemes, his threats. We can build a case against him." Zara shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "It will not matter. Everyone will believe Victor over me. I am just a woman and he is a respected businessman. They will say I am lying, that I am trying to save myself." Samuel reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me. I believe you. Daniel believes you, and we are going to make sure the truth comes out. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Zara searched his eyes, and Samuel saw the moment she made her decision. She nodded slowly. "I trust you." The word settled something in Samuel's chest, made him even more determined to protect her. He let his hands drop and stepped back, trying to ignore the way his heart was beating faster than it should. "We need to be smart about this," he said. "Victor is looking for you, and he is desperate. We need to keep you hidden until we can build a strong enough case that even the sheriff cannot ignore it. How long will that take? I do not know. But I am going to ride to Little Rock tomorrow and talk to the federal marshal. If I can convince him to investigate, we might have a chance." Zara wrapped her arms around herself. "What if Victor finds me before then? What if he comes here? Then I will deal with him," Samuel said, his voice hard. "I have a rifle and I know how to use it. Victor Jameson is not going to hurt you again, Zara. I promise you that." They went inside as the sun began to set, and Samuel made them dinner. They ate mostly in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Afterwards, they sat in the living room, and Samuel found himself telling Zara stories about his childhood on the ranch, about his parents and his sister. She listened attentively, laughing at the funny parts and looking sad at the tragic ones. "You had a good life here," she said softly. "A happy one." "I did, and I want you to have that too. A life where you do not have to be afraid all the time, a life where you are free to make your own choices." Zara looked at him with an expression that made his breath catch. "Why are you doing this for me, Samuel? Really?" He considered the question, knowing that the truth was complicated and possibly too much too soon. But looking at her sitting there in the lamplight, her green eyes full of trust and something that might have been hope, he found he could not lie. "Because from the moment I saw you in my barn, scared and desperate and brave enough to have run from a monster, I knew I could not turn you away. And every moment I have spent with you since then has only made me more certain that helping you is the right thing to do, maybe the only right thing." The air between them seemed to thicken, and Samuel saw Zara's breath quicken. She stood up slowly and crossed the small distance between them, stopping just inches away. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Samuel stood as well, and suddenly they were even closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of soap from when she had washed earlier. His hand came up of its own accord, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "Zara," he said, his voice rough. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. When they opened again, there was something raw and vulnerable in them that made Samuel's chest ache. "I know this is too fast," she said. "I know I should not feel this way about you when my life is such a mess, but I cannot help it. You have been kinder to me in 2 days than Victor was in 2 years. You make me feel safe. You make me feel like maybe there is hope for a better future." Samuel's other hand came up to frame her face, and he found himself leaning closer. "There is hope. I promise you that." And then, because he could not resist any longer, he kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But instead, Zara leaned into him, her hands coming up to clutch the front of his shirt. The kiss deepened, and Samuel felt something in his chest crack open, something he had kept locked away since his parents died. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zara rested her forehead against his. "This is crazy," she whispered. "I know. We barely know each other, I know that too. But I do not want to stop." Samuel pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "Then we will not stop." "But Zara, I need you to understand something. I am not Victor. I will never hurt you, never control you, never make you feel like you are anything less than worthy of respect and kindness. If we are going to do this, if there is going to be something between us, it has to be because you truly want it, not because you feel like you owe me or because you have nowhere else to go." Tears welled up in Zara's eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. "I want this. I want you. And not because of gratitude or desperation. I want you because you are good and kind and brave. Because you make me feel things I did not think I would ever feel again." Samuel kissed her again, slower this time, savoring the feeling of her in his arms. When they finally broke apart for the second time, he reluctantly stepped back. "You should get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow is going to be a long day." Zara nodded, but she caught his hand as he started to move away. "Will you stay with me, just for a little while? I do not want to be alone tonight." Samuel hesitated, knowing that it was probably not wise, that it blurred lines that should stay clear. But looking at the way she was holding his hand, at the vulnerability in her eyes, he found he could not say no. "All right," he agreed. "Just for a little while." They went upstairs to the guest room, and Samuel sat on the edge of the bed while Zara lay down, still fully clothed. She curled on her side, and Samuel found himself stroking her hair, the same way he might soothe a frightened animal. Gradually, her breathing evened out and she fell asleep. Samuel sat there for a long time, watching her sleep, his mind racing with plans and possibilities. He had to protect her. He had to make sure Victor faced justice. And somehow, in the midst of all this chaos and danger, he had to figure out what these feelings growing in his chest actually meant. Finally, as the moon rose high outside the window, Samuel stood carefully and made his way to his own room. But sleep did not come easily, and when it did, his dreams were filled with green eyes and a smile that made him want to believe in second chances. The next morning, Samuel woke early and prepared for the long ride to Little Rock. It was a full day's journey there and back, which meant he would not return until late evening. The thought of leaving Zara alone for that long made him uneasy, but he did not see any other choice. They needed the federal marshal's help if they were going to take down Victor Jameson. He found Zara already awake and in the kitchen making coffee. She looked up as he entered, and Samuel felt his heart skip at the sight of her in the morning light. "You are up early," he said. "I could not sleep much. I kept thinking about everything." She poured him a cup of coffee and handed it to him. "You are really going to Little Rock today?" "I have to. It is our best chance of getting someone in authority to listen." Zara bit her lip. "I do not like the idea of you leaving. What if something happens while you are gone?" "Tommy should be back from town this morning. He can stay here with you, keep watch. He is a good man and he knows how to handle a rifle." "Does he know about me?" "Not yet. But I will tell him before I leave. I trust him completely." As if on cue, they heard the sound of a wagon approaching. Samuel went to the window and saw Tommy pulling up in front of the barn. He was a lanky young man of about 25 with a perpetually cheerful demeanor and a strong work ethic. Samuel went outside to meet him, and Zara followed at a distance, staying near the porch. Tommy hopped down from the wagon and tipped his hat. "Morning, boss. Got all the supplies you asked for." "Good. Tommy, I need to talk to you about something important. Let us get these supplies unloaded first." They worked together to carry the bags of feed and other items into the barn, and then Samuel led Tommy a short distance away, out of Zara's earshot. "Tommy, I need you to do something for me today, and I need you to not ask too many questions." Tommy's cheerful expression turned serious. "What is it, boss?" "That woman on the porch, her name is Zara. She is in trouble, the kind that could get her killed if the wrong person finds her. I need you to stay here at the ranch today while I ride to Little Rock. I need you to keep watch and make sure nobody comes around who should not be here. And if anyone asks, you have not seen her. Understand?" Tommy glanced over at Zara, then back at Samuel. "This got something to do with that murder everyone in town is talking about, Robert Porter. It has everything to do with that, and that is all you need to know for now. Can I count on you?" Tommy nodded without hesitation. "You know you can, boss. I will watch over her. Nobody will get past me. There is a man named Zara Jameson. If he shows up here, you come get me immediately. Do not try to deal with him yourself. He is dangerous." "I understand." Samuel clapped him on the shoulder. "Thank you, Tommy. I knew I could count on you." They walked back toward the house, and Samuel introduced Tommy properly to Zara. She looked nervous, but Tommy gave her a friendly smile that seemed to put her at ease. "Do not you worry, Miss Zara. I will make sure nobody bothers you while the boss is gone." After a quick breakfast, Samuel saddled his fastest horse and prepared to leave. Zara walked him out to the barn, her arms wrapped around herself despite the warmth of the morning. "Be careful," she said softly. "I will. You stay close to the house and listen to Tommy if he tells you to hide. I should be back by nightfall." Zara reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his stubbled jaw. "Come back to me." The words, spoken so simply and earnestly, made Samuel's chest tighten. He covered her hand with his own. "I promise." And then, because he could not resist, he kissed her. It was brief but intense, a promise of things to come if they could just survive the storm that was heading their way. The ride to Little Rock seemed to take forever. Samuel pushed his horse hard but not too hard, knowing he would need the animal's strength for the return journey. The summer sun beat down mercilessly, and by the time he reached the city in the early afternoon, both he and his horse were exhausted. Little Rock was bustling with activity, a stark contrast to the quiet of his ranch. Samuel made his way to the federal courthouse, an imposing stone building in the center of town. Inside, he asked for the federal marshal and was directed to an office on the second floor. Marshal James Thornton was a man in his 50s with steel gray hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to see right through a person. He looked up from the paperwork on his desk as Samuel entered. "Can I help you, Marshal Thornton? My name is Samuel Nash. I have come from Bentonville with information about a murder." Thornton leaned back in his chair, his expression neutral. "I am listening." Samuel took a breath and launched into the whole story. He told the marshal about finding Zara in his barn, about Victor Jameson's claims that his wife had killed Robert Porter, about the rope burns on Zara's wrists and the fear in her eyes. He told him about Daniel Wright and the receipt for the gun, about the corruption of Sheriff Morrison and Victor's connections in town. Thornton listened without interrupting, his face giving nothing away. When Samuel finished, the marshal was quiet for a long moment. "That is quite a story," he finally said. "It is the truth, and I can prove most of it. I have the receipt from Daniel Wright, and both he and Zara are willing to testify." "Testify to what? That Victor Jameson bought a gun? That is not illegal, Mr. Nash." "No, but it establishes that he had means and opportunity. And Zara can testify to what she saw, to Victor killing Robert Porter in their home. The word of a wife against her husband, in a court of law, that does not carry much weight." Samuel felt frustration building. "So what are you saying?" "That there is nothing you can do." Thornton stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "I am saying that what you have brought me is interesting, but it is not enough for me to ride to Bentonville and arrest a man. I need more than the word of a frightened woman and a gun receipt." "Then what do you need? What will it take for you to investigate?" The marshal turned to look at him. "Physical evidence. A witness who is not the accused wife. Something concrete that ties Victor Jameson to the crime scene in a way that contradicts his story." Samuel ran a hand through his hair, thinking hard. "The body. Where Robert Porter was shot versus where his body was found. If we can prove he was killed somewhere else and moved, that would contradict Victor's story. That is a start, but you would need a doctor to examine the body, to testify about the nature of the wounds and whether they match the location where the body was found. Can you arrange that?" Thornton studied him for a long moment. "Tell me something, Mr. Nash. Why are you so invested in this? This woman, Zara Jameson, what is she to you?" Samuel met his gaze steadily. "Someone who deserves justice. Someone who deserves to be free from a man who terrorizes her." "That is not what I asked." Samuel felt his jaw clench. "She is someone I care about, someone I want to protect. Is that a problem?" "It might be if it clouds your judgment. If you are wrong about her, if she really did kill Robert Porter, you are putting yourself in danger by harboring her." "I am not wrong," Samuel said firmly. Thornton nodded slowly. "All right. I will tell you what I am going to do. I am going to wire the sheriff in Bentonville and request that the body be examined by a federal doctor. If that examination reveals anything suspicious, anything that contradicts the official story, I will come to Bentonville myself and conduct a proper investigation. But Mr. Nash, if it turns out that Victor Jameson's story is true, that his wife really did kill Robert Porter, you will be charged with harboring a fugitive. Are you willing to take that risk?" "I am." "Then go home. Keep Zara hidden and wait for me to contact you." "It should not take more than a few days." Samuel nodded and stood. "Thank you, Marshal. I know this is not standard procedure." "No, it is not. But I have been a lawman long enough to know that sometimes the truth is not as simple as it first appears. And I have heard whispers about Sheriff Morrison and his gambling debts. If there is corruption in Bentonville, I want to root it out." Samuel left the courthouse feeling cautiously hopeful. It was not the immediate action he had wanted, but it was something. Now he just had to get back to the ranch and make sure Zara was safe until the marshal could investigate. The ride back to Bentonville seemed even longer than the journey to Little Rock. By the time Samuel saw the lights of his ranch house in the distance, it was well past dark and he was exhausted. But the sight of Zara standing on the porch, her face lighting up when she saw him, made all the weariness disappear. He dismounted and practically ran to her, pulling her into his arms. She hugged him back fiercely, her face pressed against his chest. "I was so worried," she whispered. "It got dark and you were not back yet, and I thought maybe something had happened." "I am fine. The ride just took longer than I expected." He pulled back to look at her. "Where is Tommy?" "In the barn, checking on the animals one more time before he goes home. He has been wonderful, Samuel. He stayed close to the house all day and kept watch. Nobody came by." Samuel felt relief wash over him. "Good, that is good." He led her inside and told her everything that had happened in Little Rock, about Marshall Thornton's promise to investigate but also his warning that it could take a few days. Zara listened quietly, her face pale in the lamplight. When he finished, she nodded slowly. "So we wait." "We wait," Samuel confirmed. "But Zara," the marshal asked the sheriff to have a federal doctor examine Robert Porter's body. "If that doctor finds anything that contradicts Victor's story, we have a real chance of proving the truth. And if the doctor does not find anything—" Samuel reached out and took her hand. "Then we figure out another way. I am not giving up on this, Zara. I am not giving up on you." She looked at him with such gratitude and affection that it made his heart ache. "I do not deserve you. You deserve so much more than what you have been given. And I am going to make sure you get it." They stood there in the kitchen, holding hands, and Samuel felt the weight of everything that had happened settle over them. Tomorrow they would have to face whatever came next, but for tonight they were both safe and together. Tommy came in from the barn a few minutes later, and Samuel thanked him profusely for his help. After Tommy left, Samuel and Zara made a simple dinner and ate together, talking about anything except Victor and murder and the uncertain future. "Tell me more about your family," Zara said. "Your sister, the one who moved to Missouri. Are you close?" Samuel smiled. "We were when we were young. She was 3 years younger than me, always following me around, driving me crazy, but she had a good heart. She married a merchant from Kansas City and moved away about 5 years ago. We write letters sometimes, but I have not seen her since our father's funeral. Do you miss her? Sometimes. This ranch felt empty after everyone left or died. That is why I hired Tommy, not just for the help but for the company." "You have been lonely," Zara said softly. "I have. But I told myself I was too busy with the ranch to think about it. There was always work to do, animals to care for. It was easier to focus on that than to acknowledge how quiet the house had become." Zara reached across the table and took his hand. "I am glad I found your barn." Samuel laughed, a real laugh that felt good after all the tension of the past few days. "I am glad too, even if the circumstances were terrible." They cleaned up dinner together, and Samuel found himself acutely aware of every small touch, every moment when their hands brushed or their shoulders touched. The attraction between them was undeniable, growing stronger with each passing hour. When they finished, Zara turned to him. "I do not want to sleep alone tonight. Will you stay with me again?" Samuel knew he should say no, knew that it was playing with fire. But looking at her standing there, vulnerable and hopeful, he found he could not deny her. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. I just want to be close to you. I want to feel safe." They went upstairs together, and this time Samuel lay down on the bed beside her instead of just sitting on the edge. Zara curled into his side, her head resting on his chest, and Samuel wrapped his arms around her. They did not talk, just held each other as the night deepened around them. Samuel found himself thinking about the future, about what would happen once this mess with Victor was resolved. Would Zara want to stay here with him? Would she want to build a life together? Or would she want to leave Bentonville entirely, to start fresh somewhere where nobody knew about Victor or the scandal? The questions swirled in his mind, but he did not voice them. It was too soon, and there were too many unknowns. For now, It was enough to hold her and know that she was safe. The next 3 days passed in a strange sort of limbo. Samuel went about his usual ranch work with Tommy's help, while Zara stayed close to the house. They fell into a comfortable routine, eating meals together, talking late into the night, stealing kisses when the work was done. Samuel found himself falling deeper in love with her with each passing day. He loved the way she laughed at his stories, the way she helped with small tasks around the house without being asked, the way she looked at him like he was something precious. And she seemed to feel the same way about him, if the soft touches and lingering glances were any indication. On the 4th day, a rider came to the ranch. Samuel recognized him as one of Marshal Thornton's deputies from Little Rock. He met the man in the yard, his heart pounding. "Mr. Nash." "The marshal sent me with a message." The federal doctor examined Robert Porter's body and found something interesting. The angle of the bullet wound suggests Porter was shot from above, as if he was kneeling or lying down. But Victor Jameson's story is that his wife shot Porter while they were standing, arguing. The wound does not match the story. Samuel felt hope surge through him. So the marshal is coming. He is on his way now, should be here by tomorrow. He asked me to tell you to bring Zara Jameson to town. He wants to take her statement officially, and then he is going to arrest Victor Jameson for the murder of Robert Porter. Samuel thanked the deputy and hurried back to the house. He found Zara in the kitchen, and when she saw his face, she stood up quickly. "What happened?" Samuel told her everything, and he watched as relief and fear warred on her face. "It is really happening," she whispered. "Victor is going to be arrested. He is. And you are going to be free of him once and for all." Zara burst into tears, and Samuel pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried. They were not tears of sadness, but of relief, of the tension of the past few days finally breaking. "I was so afraid," she sobbed against his chest. "I was so afraid that nobody would believe me, that Victor would get away with it. I know, but it is going to be all right now, I promise." The next day, Samuel and Zara rode into Bentonville together. Samuel kept his rifle across his saddle, alert for any sign of trouble. The town was buzzing with activity, and Samuel could see Marshal Thornton's horse tied outside the sheriff's office. They dismounted and went inside, where they found Marshal Thornton and Sheriff Morrison in what appeared to be a heated discussion. The sheriff's face was red with anger, while the marshal looked coolly professional. "Ah, Mr. Nash," Thornton said, looking up, "and this must be Mrs. Jameson." Zara nodded, her hand clutching Samuel's arm. "Sheriff Morrison here has been telling me all about how Mrs. Jameson is wanted for murder. I have been explaining to him that the evidence suggests otherwise." Morrison glared at them. "This is my jurisdiction, Marshal. You have no right to come in here and start making arrests." "I have every right when there is evidence of corruption and a miscarriage of justice. Now, you can either cooperate, or I can have you arrested for obstruction. Your choice." Morrison's jaw worked, but he eventually nodded stiffly and sat back down. Thornton turned to Zara. "Mrs. Jameson, I need you to tell me exactly what happened the night Robert Porter was killed." Zara took a deep breath and began her story. She spoke clearly and steadily, detailing everything from Porter's arrival at the house to the gunshot to Victor tying her up and threatening her. When she was done, Thornton made some notes and nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Jameson. That matches what the physical evidence suggests. Now I need to go arrest your husband. Mr. Nash, I would like you and Mrs. Jameson to wait here while I do that." "Be careful," Samuel said. "Victor is dangerous." "I am always careful," Thornton replied with a slight smile. The marshal left with 2 of his deputies, and Samuel, Zara, and the visibly furious Sheriff Morrison waited in tense silence. About 30 minutes later, they heard shouting from outside, and then the door burst open. Victor Jameson stumbled in, his hands cuffed behind his back, his face twisted with rage. He was a handsome man in his late 30s, well-dressed and with an air of confidence that did not match his current situation. His eyes landed on Zara, and his expression turned murderous. "You lying witch! You are trying to frame me for a crime you committed." Zara shrank back against Samuel, and he stepped protectively in front of her. "That is enough," Marshal Thornton said firmly, pushing Victor into a chair. "Mr. Jameson, you are under arrest for the murder of Robert Porter. The federal doctor's examination of the body contradicts your statement that your wife shot Mr. Porter while standing. The angle of the wound suggests the victim was on the ground when he was shot, which matches Mrs. Jameson's account that you stood over him after dragging him." Victor's face went pale. "That is ridiculous. She is lying. She killed him and now she is trying to blame me." "I do not think so, and I have a witness who is willing to testify to your business practices, to your threats and schemes. Daniel Wright has given a statement that paints a very different picture of you than the respectable businessman you claim to be." Victor lunged to his feet, but the deputies grabbed him before he could get far. "Wright is a coward and a liar. You cannot believe anything he says." "I believe the evidence," Thornton said calmly. "And the evidence says you killed Robert Porter. You will be taken to Little Rock to stand trial, and Mrs. Jameson is free to go." Victor turned his venomous gaze on Zara one more time. "This is not over. I will get out of this, and when I do, I am coming for you." Samuel felt his temper flare. He stepped forward, his face inches from Victor's. "If you ever come near her again, if you even think about threatening her, I will make sure you regret it. You understand me?" Victor sneered. "And who are you, her new fancy man?" Did not take her long to find a replacement, did it? Before Samuel could respond, Marshal Thornton stepped between them. "That is enough from both of you. Mr. Jameson, you are going to jail. Mr. Nash, take Mrs. Jameson home." The deputies led Victor away, and Samuel watched until he disappeared from view. Then he turned to Zara, who looked pale and shaken. "It is over," he said gently. "He cannot hurt you anymore." Zara nodded slowly, but Samuel could see that she was still afraid. The fear that Victor had instilled in her would not disappear overnight, no matter how many bars were between them. Marshal Thornton came over to them. "Mrs. Jameson, I want you to know that we take threats seriously. Victor Jameson will be watched closely while he awaits trial, and if he is convicted, which I believe he will be in prison for a very long time. You are safe now." "Thank you, Marshal," Zara said softly. They left the sheriff's office and walked through town back to where their horses were tied. Samuel could feel people staring, could hear the whispers starting. The story of what had happened would be all over town by nightfall, and he knew that some people would judge Zara harshly regardless of the truth. But as they rode back toward the ranch, with the sun warm on their backs and the worst finally behind them, Samuel found that he did not care what anyone else thought. Zara was safe, Victor would face justice, and they had a chance at a future together. When they reached the ranch, Zara dismounted and stood in the yard, looking around as if seeing it for the first time. "This is really over," she said wonderingly. "I am really free." Samuel came to stand beside her. "You are free, free to make your own choices, to live your own life." She turned to look at him, her green eyes bright. "What if I choose to stay here, with you?" Samuel's heart skipped a beat. "Is that what you want?" "It is what I want more than anything, if you will have me." Samuel pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I have been yours since the moment I found you in my barn. I just did not want to pressure you, did not want you to feel like you owed me anything." Zara pulled back to look up at him. "I do not feel like I owe you. I feel like I love you." "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other for a little over a week, but I cannot deny what I feel. You saved my life, Samuel, and then you gave me hope for a future I thought I would never have." "I love you too," Samuel said, the words feeling right and true. "I think I have loved you since that first night when you told me your story and I saw how brave you were." He kissed her then, there in the yard of his ranch, with the horses nickering nearby and the chickens scratching in the dirt. It was not a fancy moment, but it was perfect in its simplicity. When they finally broke apart, both smiling, Samuel took her hand. "Come on, let us go figure out what our future looks like." The trial of Victor Jameson took place 6 weeks later in Little Rock. Samuel and Zara both testified, as did Daniel Wright and the federal doctor who had examined Robert Porter's body. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning a guilty verdict. Victor was sentenced to 30 years in prison for murder. As he was led away, he turned one last time to look at Zara, but his expression was no longer full of rage. Instead, there was something like defeat in his eyes, as if he finally understood that he had lost. Samuel and Zara returned to Bentonville as the summer turned to fall. Zara filed for divorce on the grounds of Victor's imprisonment, and within 3 months, she was legally free of him. Samuel proposed the day the divorce was finalized, and Zara said yes without hesitation. They were married in a small ceremony at the ranch, with Tommy as Samuel's best man and Daniel right in attendance as a sign of his continued support. Zara wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, and Samuel had never seen anything more beautiful. Their life together fell into a comfortable rhythm. Zara proved to be a natural at ranch life, taking to the work with the same determination she had shown in escaping Victor. She tended the garden, helped with the animals, and even learned to ride well enough to accompany Samuel when he checked the far pastures. But more than that, she filled the house with warmth and laughter. Samuel came home each evening to find dinner cooking and Zara smiling at him from the kitchen. They talked late into the night about their dreams and plans, about the future they were building together. A year after their wedding, Zara told Samuel she was pregnant. He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing with joy. Their son was born in the spring of 1880, a healthy boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. They named him James, after Samuel's father, watching Zara with their son, seeing the love and gentleness in her eyes. Samuel was reminded once again of how far they had both come. She was no longer the terrified woman hiding in his barn, and he was no longer the lonely rancher wondering if he would spend the rest of his life alone. 2 years later, they had a daughter, whom they named Caroline after Samuel's mother. And 3 years after that, another son, Thomas, named for Tommy, who had become like family to them. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Samuel expanded the herd and built a larger barn, while Zara started selling her sewing work to women in town, eventually building up a small but successful business. They hired more help as the children grew, good people who became part of their extended family. Samuel kept in touch with Marshall Thornton over the years, and through him, he learned that Victor Jameson had died in prison after serving only 10 years of his sentence. When the letter came with that news, Samuel showed it to Zara, watching her face carefully. She read it slowly, then set it down and looked up at him. "I should feel something," she said softly. "Relief, maybe, or vindication, but I just feel empty, like that part of my life is so far behind me now that it does not even seem real anymore." Samuel took her hand. "That is because you have built a new life, a better life. Victor does not get to haunt you anymore." Zara smiled, the expression full of peace. "No, he does not. I have you and our children and this wonderful life we have made. That is all that matters now." As the years passed, Samuel and Zara's children grew into fine adults. James took over much of the ranch work, showing the same dedication and skill his father had. Caroline became a teacher in Bentonville, beloved by her students and respected throughout the community. Thomas went to college in Little Rock and became a lawyer, dedicated to helping people who could not afford proper legal representation. Samuel and Zara watched their children flourish with pride, knowing that they had given them something precious that Zara herself had almost been denied the freedom to choose their own paths, to build their own happiness. On a warm evening in the summer of 1898, Samuel and Zara sat together on the front porch of their ranch house, the same porch where they had shared so many conversations 20 years earlier. They were in their 50s now, their hair touched with gray, but the love between them had only grown deeper with time. "You remember the first time we sat here together?" Zara asked, her hand in his. "I remember everything about those early days," Samuel replied. "I remember how scared you were and how brave. I remember the moment I knew I was falling in love with you, even though it seemed crazy given the circumstances." Zara leaned her head on his shoulder. "I was so lost back then. I thought my life was over, that I would never be free of Victor, never be happy. And then I found your barn and you, and everything changed." "You changed my life too," Samuel said, kissing the top of her head. "Before you came, I was just going through the motions, working the ranch but not really living. You reminded me what it meant to have someone to care for, someone to build a future with." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the Arkansas landscape. In the distance, they could hear their grandchildren playing, James's 3 children who visited often. The sound of their laughter carried on the evening breeze, a reminder of the legacy of love and family that Samuel and Zara had built together. "No regrets?" Samuel asked softly. Zara turned to look at him, her green eyes still as bright as they had been that day in the barn. "Not a single one. Everything I went through, as terrible as it was, led me to you, led me to this life. How could I regret that?" Samuel kissed her then, a kiss that held 20 years of love and partnership, of challenges faced together and joys shared. When they broke apart, both smiling, he held her close and thought about how a single moment of compassion, of choosing to help rather than turn away, had changed everything. He had found a woman hiding in his barn, and her story had indeed made him question everything he thought he knew about love, about courage, about the kind of man he wanted to be. And in the end, that questioning had led him to the greatest happiness he had ever known. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Samuel Nash held his wife close and gave thanks for the day he had walked into his barn and found not just a woman in need, but his future, his heart, his home. Their story, born from fear and desperation, had bloomed into something beautiful and lasting. And as they sat together on that porch, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built, the thriving ranch, the successful children, the promise of generations to come, they knew that every struggle had been worth it. Love had found them in the most unlikely of circumstances, and it had sustained them through every challenge that followed. And now, in the golden years of their lives, they could look back and see clearly that sometimes the best things come from the worst moments, that hope can be found even in the darkest places, and that choosing kindness over caution can lead to the greatest rewards. The woman who had hidden in Samuel Nash's barn that June evening in 1878 was no longer running or hiding. She was home, truly home, in a place where she was loved and valued and free. And the rancher who had found her had discovered something far more valuable than he could have imagined: a partner, a love, a reason to believe in second chances. Their story was one that would be passed down through their family for generations, a reminder that compassion and courage can change lives, that love can heal even the deepest wounds, and that sometimes the best thing we can do is simply choose to help, to care, to open our hearts to those in need. And so, as the night settled over the ranch and Samuel and Zara finally made their way inside, hand in hand as always, their story came full circle. What had begun with fear and blood and desperate flight had ended with love and peace, and a future bright with promise. It was, in every sense, a life well lived and a love well earned.